Welcome to Casual Watch Talk, the podcast from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel. Join us as we talk everything watches, from watch collecting, the latest horology news and interviews. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe on your favourite podcast app. Let's dive into the show. Hello everyone, welcome back to episode 29 of Casual Watch Talk. I was amazed we got to 25, Chris. I don't know about you, but
clearing some hurdles.
We're looking right down the nose of 30 now. And thank you everyone that has subscribed recently. What's great to see is Chris and I get to see a little bit of the figures behind the scenes of you all listening. It seems like each podcast we do, more and more of you listening. So welcome to all of the new listeners. And of course,
yes,
please head over to the Casual Watch Talk Facebook group. We're nearly at 100 members, which is pretty amazing.
Nice. Yeah. And it's a private group, so you got to ask to join, but that's okay. If you're a real user, if you're not a robot, then you'll be able to get in, and we'd love to have you.
We have a series of very difficult questions that if you don't know the answer to, you are not allowed in.
Right, yeah.
That's not really it.
No, it's just like, what year did Audemars Piguet? No.
Exactly.
No, honestly, it's like, I think I think currently the standard is you've been a Facebook user for longer than 6 months, which is good. You know, no super fresh bot accounts. But yes.
And if any of the answers are Steinhardt, that's an automatic fail.
Right.
So we've got a couple of news stories, and then we've got an interesting story that was emailed in to me by a viewer. Chris and I love receiving all your emails and your direct messages on the Facebook group and questions on there. So this was an email I got just this week, actually, and Chris and I have been talking about it. So I think it would make quite a good main topic. And it's basically around, it was a new watch collector that emailed me asking me about advice. So Chris and I, of course, got talking about what advice would we give ourselves now being a new watch collector.
Whew. Yeah.
Don't start.
I won't. Right. Don't start. Yes. Yes. Don't start now, and maybe.
Yeah. Use your phone as a clock.
Right.
Anyway, so we think we can have a little bit of fun with that. So let's kick it off with the watch obsession. So, Chris, would you like to do the honors?
Sure. So I had ordered a 3D printer back in November, and this is not this is a watch podcast, not a 3D printer podcast. And so finally it showed up during the pandemic, which was good, because if you want 1,000 hours to work on something, definitely a new project it's good to get a new project, new hobby. Anyway, keeping me out of trouble. And one of the things that I started to do is I want to make a NATO strap adapter for my Casio Solar. So unlike all of the other Casios that are out there that you can get those metal adapters for, the Casio Solars, I think it's the GW850 or GV850. I've mentioned it before, and certainly can be corrected on the Facebook group, but it's an integrated rubber bracelet. And so the bracelet, much more contact with the watch face than the standard, the square, G-Shock square.
Yep.
And so I am attempting to build a 3D model and model it. I've printed out I probably have about 15 iterations now that I've printed out. I'm getting closer and closer. And then just recently I hit a snag where they made it so that you can't left-hand it. They made it so that the lugs on the top are different than the lugs on the bottom.
Wow, that's weird.
So I know. So you look at it and it looks like, okay, it's got two things jutting out, and it takes a spring bar and then it's sort of molded sides, and they look identical at first look, but it isn't until you've sat there and measured it with a micrometer for 3 hours and 3D modeled it that you realize that the top ones stick out a little further and are sort of shaped differently. And so I was super frustrated because when you assume that they're the same, I was running into trouble modeling it because I just assumed they were the same. And then I was like measuring one side and then printing it for that and then putting it on the other side and it wasn't working. So then I'm like, I'm a horrible failure at 3D modeling. And it turns out it's subtle differences between the top and the bottom. So that has definitely been my obsession, is trying to get close enough so that I can get an adapter on there and maybe get the G-Shock Solar, the Tough Solar with the Rally timer in it onto a NATO, or just the ability to take some different strap options. Ability to put a 22 or a 20 mil strap on it, or rubber strap on it, something different.
Question I've got about that: I once ordered some 3D printed lug adapters for a G-Shock Rangeman, and they broke straight away because I think at that time 3D printing the plastic was quite brittle. So is this durable?
Yeah, so it's come a long way. So I'm really glad. I have been excited about 3D printing for probably 5-6 years, and I'm really glad I didn't run out and buy anything, because I'd say 5 years ago it was a science experiment. Where just like the technology and how it prints and how it prints support material and like it is 5 years ago. It is not like a laser printer where you're like, I have this document I want to print, and you hit print and magic comes out when on paper. That's absolutely not the case. Now, today's 3D printers, 2020, summer of 2020, you can get repeatable results. People are getting the same results. So the manufacturing has gotten better, the software has gotten better, and the material has gotten better. So if you had it done in just PLA is already is a biodegradable material.
Right.
So like if it was exposed to the sun, just having it's not a super durable material that I would expect to hold on to a watch. So maybe it was made out of that. There are some companies that can print in nylon, and if you can have it printed in nylon, it's nigh indestructible. It's like you can't break it because it's literally just as durable as molded nylon part.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, so maybe it was the and then they have sort of in between. I've been playing with PETG, which is a polymer. It's the same sort of polymer that they make water bottles out of, and it's flexible, durable kind of thing. And so they've come a long way, like I said, in materials and printing.
So this one is where is this yours is like a continuous stream of plastic that comes out. It's not a resin, like a laser over a resin.
Yeah, exactly. SLA. It's deposited nozzle. It's got a nozzle that heats up the plastic and deposits it. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, awesome! You have to stick a picture over on the Facebook group. So that's been your watch obsession, is creating them.
Exactly. Printing many. I'll show a picture of all the little adapter iterations that I've got. I got a little pile. It looks like a little pile of Legos that I've like changed one little thing and little corner, and it fits a little better, and I've got the pin fitting and the screws kind of starting to work. So I'll definitely post that up.
Well, my watch obsession has been trying not to be obsessed with watches. So I've been, during the lockdown, I think we joked about this last episode. I've just been addicted to Amazon. I've been buying watch straps like they've been going out of fashion. So this week I was like, I've got to stop. I've got to break this habit. So I have a little app that I use on my iPhone that about 4.5 years ago, well, actually, not quite 4.5 years ago, I stopped drinking. So I haven't had beer. I used to love beer, and I haven't had beer in 4.5 years, or any alcohol really. And I have an app that kept track of it. Anyway, there's been an update to this app, and you can put other addictions in. So I put online shopping as an addiction. And because you're getting like points and stuff like that, I'm going to try and break the habit of, and this will probably lead into our main topic. So I've been trying to not buy watch straps. And last month I went all out. I was buying stuff for my Breitling watch to replace the battery and things like that. So I needed to cool down. But in reality, what I've been obsessing about this week hasn't been a watch at all. I've been obsessed. Have you seen that new Ford Bronco?
Yeah.
I just, there's something about that.
Just love it.
I think being British, you just don't see those type of very over-the-top four-wheel drives. Like, I know of one person that had a pickup truck, I think in Manchester, a Dodge pickup truck. You don't see these sort of big, almost like cartoony type vehicles, but the way they've done that Bronco, it just looks fantastic.
Yeah, the retro styling is really cool. It's a cool looking vehicle. I don't know who started this trend. I mean, maybe Tesla, but others. This trend of now with the materials that are coming out, where they can basically have a closer to what looks like a concept car reality. I mean, I feel like, when we were kids, they would show the concept car and it'd be like the Jetson Space Mobile. And then what we got was, a Dodge Dart, It was like, wait, how's this anything like this? But more and more, I'm from the car side, I'm seeing, practically like Honda has that little electric car that they come out with. And if you look at what they came out with at the show versus what is in production, it's like not that far away. I mean, there's a couple of pieces of plastic difference, a couple of DOT things that they had to add, reflectors, things like that. But I mean, on paper, I mean, it looks like the same thing, and same thing with the Ford.
And isn't it funny how this love of vintage that's been driving the watch industry the last couple of years is now bleeding into cars?
I think it's not a coincidence. Because I say, if you feel that same sort of passion with Resto Mod, where they take an older look, an older shell out here, that what they'll do in California for Resto Mods, they'll put like a modern, LS engine in it with fuel injection and air conditioning and power steering and disc brakes and da-da. So you've got the shell, this 60s, 70s muscle car that of course has air conditioning and ABS and power brakes and all that, and control and all the amenities inside, but yet is that vintage machine. I kind of dig that, in the same way that I do not want to own a 1950s Omega vintage watch, because I'd be terrified to do anything with it. I would rather own something that evokes that feeling, but yet has seals made out of silicone and new watch parts, new movements, things like that.
Yeah, I often joke with my wife, I love my Mini Club Mint. It's not a vintage Mini Club Mint, it's a 2012 one, but they don't do that style anymore. So I joke with her that I'm going to keep it until I can buy an electric conversion kit off Amazon, because it's only a matter of time. It's like, I say, like $5,000, Jeff Bezos. Get me the electric motors. I can just throw in.
Just order the battery from a Chevy Volt. Drop that in under the they show you exactly where to cut in the trunk, and then just drop it in.
Okay, well, enough of casual car talk. Although we might be able to branch out with that.
Right. Casual
less niche.
3D printing car talk. All right.
Well, let's start off by, as always, covering some of the news stories. Now, we're going to be very grown up this week, Chris. I think the stories are quite grown up of us.
Okay.
But I'll get your view on them. First one, they're grown up, but I think they're quite interesting, actually. The first one is Richemont Group just released its sales figures. There's only a few of the big boys that we can get sales figures off, because Rolex is a charitable foundation, and you can't get sales figures except for in the UK, because they have to release them onto Companies House. But that's sort of private sort of company or charity, you can never really get accurate sales figures from Rolex. But Richemont Group, very famously, of course, own Montblanc, IWC, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Lange Vacheron, Panerai, of course. They released their figures year on year for Q2. They were down 56%. Richemont own other fashion brands as well, but 56% down from... And it's certainly COVID, but I mean, that's a hell of a whack down, isn't it, really?
Yeah. I would also say, I feel like some of this is due to really no travel too. Like a lot, it's kind of like I'd say no travel. I would say their inability to sort of pivot to internet sales.
Yep.
Because there are no, I mean, this isn't like Swatch. There are no brands here that I would expect that I could, pick up on the internet other than Grey Market.
They obviously own Watchfinder in there as well, which I thought was surprising, since you think that the secondhand market might have had an increase.
Yeah, interesting. But yeah, I feel like it's kind of a take between, the fact that no one can travel. So you don't have that. I don't know about you, but I know when you go to Vegas and when I go fancy places, I definitely like, oh yeah, I'll go check out the fancy watch shop downtown, that kind of thing. I mean, certainly if I went anywhere in Europe, like Germany, Switzerland, UK, I would go to the shops there for sure.
And it would mean more to you buying a Swiss watch in Switzerland if you could go there, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah. I totally, if I do a trip to Germany and I happen to visit Zinn, I am absolutely sure I will walk out of there with a watch. that will happen. Because it's just one of those things, right?
Yeah, so that equated in US dollars to minus 2.27 billion.
That's a chunk. That's a chunk.
That is quite a chunk.
Listening to folks talk about the used market and how that's popping, and internet retailers are popping right now. So I mean, that I'm sure that's a big part of that.
All the Breitling that sold out some of their new models, but there's Rob. That story was from Watch Pro, and Rob Corder, who's I think he might be the chief editor at Watch Pro, wrote a very interesting article on limited edition watches. I won't go into it too much now, but it's highly, highly worth it. I'll put a link in the show notes. But essentially, he was saying that watches, not only are we getting limited edition watches, but we're getting watches that are limited supply, which is more of a worrying thing. It's like the Rolex Hulk and the Batman and things like that. They're just limited supply models. And what he's saying is that he thinks that watch companies now after COVID will stick to more of these limited supply watches because they're tried and tested, instead of doing the new tooling, creating the concept watches for the future. And in fact, it might result in a fairly vanilla offerings for the next couple of years we saw it with Tudor with just the blue version of the
right, yeah.
Whereas Tudor the year before they tried the P01 or whatever it was,
which is right, yeah. And that was definitely, that was polarizing, but also just the operation of that bezel meant that they had to make different machinery in order to produce that watch, for sure.
Absolutely. So next grown-up story, we covered this a couple of episodes ago where we talked about how ETA was being held to account by the Swiss Competition Commission. They had to limit the number of movements that they supplied because of unfair competition. In fact, what that meant is that Sellita ended up taking over as the largest third-party movement manufacturer in Switzerland. They sold like 1 million movements or something, and we were certainly seeing it, weren't we, in the micro brand sections?
Yeah, it was interesting when you brought it up, because I remember I assumed, and I think others assumed, that it was that they were holding them back to drive demand.
Yeah.
When in actuality, it was like, no, we're governmentally prevented from selling this to you.
It was news to me that, and apparently this is also news to me that I wasn't aware of, is that this was a 7-year arrangement with the Swiss government. And that comes to an end. And they've had the reins taken off them. So the Swiss government is now not restricting them. So Swatch's shares rose. Swatch, of course, the parent company of ETA.
Right.
Their shares rose 12% just on that news. Now, apparently, the Swiss government, the Swiss Competition Commission, has put into place caveats around they can't flood the market with movements now. But when's that ever stopped anyone?
I know, right? Yeah. Okay, and also that's weird. Flood the and like prove that you flood the market. That's not how that company would function if it was in the EU or Europe or the UK, or definitely not in the United States.
No.
As far as like a 7-year agreement that they won't, but it's good for us. I think a lot more having more choice, and then a lot more of these micro brands having access to ETA is great.
Exactly. And you think, we won't flood the market. How much is the fine? And if the Swiss was like, it's like 1 million Swiss francs, they'd be like, okay, so we just need to make sure we make 2 million profit.
Right.
Then.
Yeah, exactly. So find out what will kill us and then back it off a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, yeah. So it also interesting to see like if that will affect. It's interesting they have their hand really in that. I mean, that's one of those things where, like I said, it would certainly not fly here, and it would certainly not fly in in other parts of the, free market.
Yeah, we do have cases of that, certainly in Europe, in the UK. I know in the past that they're definitely very strong monopolies situations, certainly more so than I imagine the US, because you only have to look at the US airlines. That's an oligopoly, isn't it, where there's only really 3 or 4 majors that are holding all of the cards. And you could argue that with the main watch brands as well, isn't there? There's Rolex, Richemont,
right?
Swatch.
That they're all combined. Comparison to the airlines, what's interesting is the United States is kind of the only place where many multiple airline companies exist. I mean, how many airlines are flying out of the UK? How many airlines are flying out of Spain?
Well, we do have the low-cost airlines as well. So we have like Ryanair, EasyJet. There was a few, but there's some that are short-lived as well. But there was at one time quite a boom in sort of low-cost. You don't really get low-cost airline. You get Spirit over here, but they're nowhere near as cheap as...
Yeah, you think you have multiple choices, but in actuality, they're controlling the price. So you think, just like these watch companies, you think like, oh, I'm getting this, this brand that's, 1,000 years old and that is, independent, whatever. And you're like, no, they're just part of a giant group and they're controlling the manufacture and sale of, 15 brands.
Yeah. Don't get me started on TAG again. And we better stop there.
Yep.
Okay, guys, before we dive into the main story, let's just pause for a few words from our sponsors. Hey everyone, welcome back. This is going to be quite an interesting main topic, and thanks to a new subscriber to the channel, and thanks for emailing me, John Baptiste. I won't say your full name, but you know who you are. Thank you for emailing me, and also thank you for posing that question on our Casual Watch Talk Facebook group. The question basically revolved around, he's a new watch collector. He really likes the minimalist look of Namos. Really likes the design. And then he sent me a few other brands. Now, I'd not heard of them, but a couple of them were clearly watches that were made in Hong Kong. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with Chinese or Hong Kong. But then they had this sort of ruse of, we're inspired by Paris and this kind of rubbish that they use, these fake stories. And they were clearly homages to Namos. In fact, some of them look like homages to Braun, which I actually told him to check Braun out, because Braun has such amazing designs. And also Johnny Ives, who was the head designer for Apple, slates Braun as a lot of the Apple products were inspired by Braun designs. Like the original iPod was a Braun radio from the 60s or something, or similar. And so I said to him a couple of things, and this probably will spur our competition, but one was my view now. Well, I'll kick this off. We can talk about how advice that we wish we'd given ourselves at the start. And this was sort of how I replied back to Jean-Baptiste. So the first one was, I said to him, if you really like Namos, the look of it, you're going to need to buy a Namos. Because this is one thing that I learned, was no amount of lookalike or homage watches is really, you think it's going to scratch the itch, but I don't believe it does. What do you think?
I 100% agree. I 100% agree. I think that I shopped around for a titanium blue diver for too long, and I should have gone out and picked myself up a Tudor Pelagos. Because that's what I liked in the beginning, and you think that it's like a checkbox where it's like, it's got, and this works both ways. So you list off the stuff that, it's got sapphire and it's got a nice movement in it, it's an adhesive, and it's a super value, and it's and it looks great, and it looks similar to, and and it's got the same specs. So in the same way that the specs are really, really important to the marketing department, but then don't matter when they just come out with a different color. Like you just don't, like everything goes in the window because you're just like, oh yeah, I want the green one. And you're like, it doesn't even matter because I just want the green one. In that same way, you could make the list of it has exactly everything just like the watch that you really wanted, and it's just, it won't hold it. It won't hold a candle to it. So.
Yeah, I think a cautionary tale here is that maybe because certainly I know when I was starting out, and even now, if I really liked the look of a Rolex Submariner, I still wouldn't buy one because I think they're extremely expensive. And there was certainly a time in my life where I liked them and I just could not afford them. So I think coming to the realization that buying a watch with a similar spec to the one you like, you're just going to have to live with the fact that it's not quite that watch, I think. And if you're happy with that, then God love you. It's like when I used to drink and there's people like, oh, I'm all right. I could just have 1 pint of beer and that does me for the night and I can just go home. I'd be like, how are you doing that?
Right. Yeah.
If you really like an expensive watch, you either have to realize that if you're buying a homage to it, you're just going to have to be happy with what it is. It's not going to be quite there. And the other thing as well is I think you have to realize that if you like a lot of watches look like Rolex, but only Rolex is Rolex. There's so many interesting watches that are coming out from micro brands. I think that you can certainly find something. That Phoebus that I reviewed, I mean, I'm amazed that theirs are essentially unique designs and they're knocking them out at $300. It's incredible, really. But so that was one thing I said to him. And also I said to him in the email that one of the mistakes I made at the start was quantity of watches. I was building a collection and I got really excited and built it fast. So I bought Vostoks, I bought the SKX 009. I suppose this could lead into another one, which is the trap that I fell into was painting by numbers. Oh, I have to have the SKX. Oh, I have to have this. Watching TGV
one Speedmaster, please. One Rolex, one Speedmaster, one or Omega, something, and yeah.
I think you have to be. I think you need, when you're first starting out watch collecting, just really think about and do your research and think about what you like. Unfortunately, what's a shame with a lot of these micro brands and brands like Orient, which are great value for money, Seiko to a certain extent, is you can't really try them on. Like, you can't try these micro brands on, and it really, trying them on is, if you try that watch on and it doesn't feel right, there's no amount of convincing. You might convince yourself for a couple of weeks, I think, but after that.
Yeah. One of the things that I had some success with is for the different watch types, I always felt like the same thing. Your paint by numbers description is perfect. Like to get one chronograph, one diver, one, three-hander, one dress watch. I think one of the things that I did that was successful that I might suggest here, if you feel that you're sort of after that, is get a $100, $150 chronograph, quartz chronograph that's on your wrist, and try that. Sort of had that experience of like, am I a chronograph guy? Am I a Speedmaster guy? Am I, is this something that I want to have on my wrist and sort of want to save up for, that kind of thing. In that way, I think, okay, and there will still be people that argue like, well, you could have saved yourself, $300 or whatever for that watch. But sometimes, I'm very much with the stuff I do, whether it's a hobby or any sort of experience, I'm very much you got to go try it. You got to go do it and see if you like it. Because like, if you think, oh, I really like the look of the Speedmaster, I'm going to wear it. If you can't go pick that up, or you're not sure that would be the thing for you, then I think trying stuff is okay, in that case. But when you start getting into, like $1,000, homages, mechanical homage, $1,000 mechanical homage of a Speedmaster, when you really just want a Speedmaster, you should just save your money.
The other thing as well, which I think when you start out, is educate yourself as much as possible, because not always spending more money is getting an exponentially better watch. I've realized this probably in the last 6 months or whatever, that sometimes value is the key, isn't it? Instead of, I'm going to spend $10,000 on this watch because I think I'm getting a 10,000 times better watch than another one, is not necessarily always the truth. So do your research.
I think that they're right. I agree. I mean, we both have talked about the fact that I think that we're value watch buyers, and we sort of live in that world, and to know if there's something I had to tell myself, if we go back in time and tell myself, it would be something related to that with the value, with the price level of watches, because I definitely can remember getting into it and being like, ooh, $500 for this Hamilton. Whew, I got a fancy Switch watch on my wrist. And now, my brother was talking about picking up a Garmin smartwatch, and he's like, yeah, it's a little pricey, and it was $700, and I was like, okay. like I look down at my wrist and I'm like, all right, what, $700? So, and sort of the sky's the limit there, just like luxury, anything, just like wine, just like art. I mean, it goes it goes exponential there. And can you say like, oh, well, this is worth 50,000 times better because it's this much more money? Well, you're lots of stuff that goes into that.
And I'm going to say a controversial one here, but this is also quite funny, is if you're wearing a watch brand that is uncommon, the only people that are going to ask you about that watch brand is watch geek like us.
Yep. That's absolutely. Yep. I don't know if we admitted it on the show, but I will admit it on the show if I didn't do this already. But I definitely have a watch that I love because everybody loves it on Instagram, and when I wear it to watch Hangouts, it gets lots of love. And it's one of those things where it's part of the hobby, part of me, part of the discovery of this. So there definitely is that. And would I have picked one of these up, beforehand? Probably not. But it's only after being in the hobby for a while. So
yeah. And the other thing I would say, one for me, is don't be afraid of selling watches that you don't like, even if you're going to take a hit on them. For me, I would rather sell it on to a good home, or know that I have tried it, I liked it for a bit, I fell out of love with it, wasn't quite for me. Each watch is a learning experience, and I think you don't have to be afraid of letting them go, I would say.
Yeah, I think that goes along with my sort of, you have to try it. I think that there's and recognize when, if you're a person that's obsessive with the hunt or with checking off the boxes, if you're obsessive about that, then you're going to have a problem with this. So sort of set your expectations, like, can this be the watch? Can I be happy with this? Am I going to enjoy this? And also, try new things, go out and try new stuff. So I guess, there's probably a gray area that I don't know if I could describe to myself, my past self, of serial flipping versus I just enjoy trying, I tried this and I tried that, and and then next thing you know, I'm a massive eBay seller.
It's funny, I started watching TGV again. I kind of go up and down with his views. I mean, there's no doubt about it. His content is just so well made. You can't just help but be in awe of it.
I'll stop you for a quick second. I did as well. I think now that he is doing his own thing again, I really enjoy that background information. That's what really got me interested in his channel when he first came out, is like that. I learn about the brand. I learn about the history, the connection to it. It's great.
Exactly. And he did his War Room update he does each year, and you can tell that he's definitely got some compulsive hoarding tendencies. I would say I'm probably going to get a lot of trouble with TGV fans, and Tristano, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I'm not a medical diagnosis, but he said something that made me think about my own collection. But he said, oh, well, more or less along the lines of, he stopped selling watches now, he just kind of hides them away in a safe, and then when he gets them back, it's like having a new watch collection. So he never lusts after new watches. But he does. You can tell that he still does. And I'm like, dude, you're in deep. You're in a lot deeper than... This is probably the most valuable lesson that TGV has taught me.
Right.
I think he's in too deep. And if this goes back to my point is, if you are happy with a lot of watches, then God love you. I mean, I know people who've got very specialist collections, like Todd, who's a big friend of the show, who collects Seiko chronographs, and it's the art of the hunt, and then he does restore these afterwards. But I don't. If you have a collection of 1,000, lower end watches because you just started out wanting quantity. All of my points are coming around to the same thing. Anyway, essentially, don't be afraid to sell them as you go along, because at the end of the day, just think about the ones that you're wearing, the ones that you love. Because I certainly have done that. I've bought and sold hundreds probably of watches now, even in the last couple of years, and Or I've given them away, some of the watches that I get sent in as well, because I've liked them, but I knew that somebody else would like it more, basically.
Yeah. And I will say it's been interesting talking to you, Sam, because you have that not problem, but that same potential where, I mean, you run a YouTube channel where you review watches, and so you need content. And so there's definitely times where I see you sort of fighting that, like, that internal, do I buy a new watch struggle, along with the fact that, like, well, I want to have something to talk about, or I want to show people stuff, this is the new watch we're talking about, things like that. Interesting content, and so, I agree. The quick how quickly you build a collection is not, no one's gonna, that's not a checkbox, you can take your time.
You can take your time. Yeah, exactly. And these are totally anybody's listening to this who's got a big collection and loves it, then congratulations to you.
No, it's great.
It's just it's just the way.
And also not us. And yeah, let me say, not for us to say what a big collection is.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
last podcast, my watch obsession was talking about sort of my 3-watch, see if I could get it down. And honestly, we kind of talked about it on the Facebook group, which was, I think now I am okay with, I have watches that I collect, and then I have a couple of watches that I wear every day, and sort of broken for the love of horology and for, the fun of it, and having these interesting mechanical devices that, bring joy. Okay, there's that checkbox, and there's that box of watches, and then there's the, I need it to function, every day, and I need, it's got to be, I'm using it as a tool, and sort of separated that out, and I think I'm okay. And I'll be honest, I did the same thing, this, like, watch safe thing. Like, I've got a case with 8, and I popped 8 watches in there and put it away, and so they're not next to my dresser. I don't see them every day. And maybe I'll have that sort of same experience where I'm like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah. It's probably actually a good way of doing it. Maybe I should do it as well. And there's so much cool watches across all price ranges. I think the more you spend on a watch does not necessarily mean that you're going to love it more than
right.
a lower end,
right?
A lower end watch. But I don't know. Can you think of any more, Chris, that you would advise you'd give yourself looking back?
I think, well, we talked about budget. We talked about the collection itself.
I would say about YouTubers as well is I like certain things in watches, and I'm trying to end my reviews with just basically saying this is my view and take it or leave it type of thing, because I do genuinely mean that there's certain things that I like in watches, like the date, for example. I love seeing the date on a watch. So I would watch multiple different reviews of the same watch. I would encourage you to, instead of one particular YouTuber.
Yeah. And I found, on that same vein, there are certain reviewers that, not necessarily like a paid review, but like they'll generally have sort of this ultimate positive about everything, and I almost look for, either give me a balance of like what you like, what you don't like, but I want to hear what you don't like, and then judge it for myself. I'm fine with no date, give me a no date diver, totally fine, but that would bug you. But there's just the fact that you would say like, well, this isn't for me, and then I can just, okay, then I sort of feel like it's a more balanced review, because I know what you sort of feel about it, and kind of go from there. But I think on the whole, I would go with sort of your first advice, which was save up for the Nomos. If you think you want that, save up for that, and get that up. Those are not high priced. They're reasonably priced.
This is actually another good one as well. Is I would say, with a caveat, don't be afraid to buy pre-owned luxury watches, but do be afraid of buying vintage watches. Or not be afraid, but be wary of buying vintage watches of watches that have gone up in value, that weren't necessarily luxury to... No, I'm going to say this. Well, some of the lower end watches that have now become popular, they can be a bit of a minefield on eBay, but I wouldn't be scared like Chrono 24 of buying a luxury watch. In fact, I would encourage people to buy a pre-owned watch if you're looking for a watch that was made in the last 20 years or something.
Yep. I think I've mentioned it, and my two pieces of advice there are: I had success with purchasing pre-owned and getting a amazing watch for the money. And I also had the experience of purchasing a brand new watch at an authorized dealer, and it is an experience, and I mean, to be enjoyed. And it was for for celebrating something, and it's perfectly okay if you just say, okay, well, I want to celebrate this milestone. That's totally fine. And if the milestone is it happens to be a Saturday afternoon, that's fine too.
I've just thought of two more, actually. These are just this has come flooding out at me. It's like the ghosts of Christmas past. First one is Stephen on the Facebook group is going to be shouting his probably podcasting app now, available on all your popular podcasting apps, that if you are going to buy a vintage watch, make sure that you don't get carried away with the aesthetics of the watch itself. Make sure that it has a movement in it that can still be easily serviced, like ETA would be a classic example of this, because some vintage watches are almost impossible to get serviced, so do your research there. And then the other one that I was thinking of that I would kind of tell myself in retrospect was, the other thing I was going to say, and I've just got a newfound love for this, is you are going to not like quartz watches for a bit, and then you're going to really like them, I think.
Right.
I don't know what you think about that.
Yes, you will have a fall. You're right. Allow the snobbery to flow over for a little bit, and then you'll be like, listen, I just want something. reach into the watch box and have something that's on.
Yeah, I've certainly found that recently. I've had a newfound love of quartz. I suppose with us being in quarantine orders as well, just having that sort of grab and go quartz as well. I also said a few little cheeky ones to John Baptiste as well. I said, you're going to find out a couple of facts that I did, that Citizen probably make the best quartz watches. Seiko watches are good, but not as good as everyone makes out that they are. And the one that I said at the start is, if you really like Rolex, oftentimes only a Rolex will do. Having said that, they're horrendously expensive, and I wouldn't necessarily if you don't. Oh, and the final point, Chris, is, I've got to say this, is please don't ever buy a watch on credit. If you can't afford it, don't buy it.
Yep. Yeah, we've said that a bunch, and just to hit that home, it has to be, for me, it's got to be play money. It's got to be stuff that's just that I've heard a couple of YouTubers with the same advice. So you have all your bills paid, you have your car payment paid, you got gas in your car, you got the lights on, you got food on the table, you got 10% of your income into a savings account for a retirement. Okay, now we'll talk about the $250 you got left to maybe spend on a watch or to save for a watch. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, guys, let us know over on the Facebook group what you think of our tips if you've got any yourself. Chris, any final words before we wrap up here?
No, just I would say final word. Have fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. There are a lot of folks that definitely can take this and any hobby way too seriously. I would hope that it seems like we don't, and so you can have fun with it. Wear what you like. Enjoy it, and definitely enjoy sharing your experience and your pictures and things with us over at the Facebook group.
Absolutely. As always, guys, really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.